Uh, Thank you, Anatoly. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, glory to Christ, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this very important discussion. And I ask your apology for not being able to speak offline. Uh, Thank all the speakers for your reflections. As you may imagine, your opinions are extremely important for the nation that tries to seek unanimous support in resisting the Russian aggression in Ukraine. Unfortunately, we face the whole spectrum of reactions. And as you have admitted that already, some elements of the Vatican position were especially painful for us. This is why the support you have provided is so important for us. Thank you. Let me give you just a few reactions on what was said before. I am glad Professor Dr. Irena Weisswilaite that in our times we do not need to send one man to Rome to deliver the information about the atrocities committed in our countries. Now the whole war was going on and is going on online on our iPhones. So it's incredible change in our history, and I do hope that it will bring some very important changes in perception of this war. Then let me address the idea of Jan Tombinsky about the universal church. The trick is that Russian Orthodox Church considers itself as a universal church. You all know the concept of the third Rome. So from the medieval times, we see the phenomenon of mimesis. The Vatican is a role model for Moscow. That's why they pretend to be a universal church, and we Ukrainians always heard about that. But you're absolutely right, Ambassador. In fact, the Russian Orthodox Church is clearly a national church. And the scandal that Patriarch Kirill didn't say a word in favor of Ukrainians simply justified that conclusion. I will mention some ideas expressed by Professor Tamara Dzalidze and Ambassador Tatiana Izhevska a bit later. So my comments will be based partially on my recent meeting with Pope Francis. So let me first of all inform you what I told Pope Francis about Ostpolitik. We see that the Ukrainian policy of the Vatican is still a derivative of its Russian policy. However, with the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, these inertial Ostpolitik traditions in the Vatican, in our opinion, became intolerable. We urge His Holiness to consider this as one of the most important problems and to look at us not through Moscow glasses. Ukraine is trying to win its subjectivity at a high price, and the Vatican should fully take this into account. In the optics of Ostpolitik, Ukraine and its churches have always been considered troublemakers. Our subjectivity did not fit into Russia-oriented models because Moscow did not recognize our subjectivity. We are convinced, however, that as soon as the Vatican forms its own Ukrainian policy, it will be impossible to see that it will be impossible not to see the still untapped opportunities in Ukraine that can help solve these problems. We have also, according to my understand that being a pope doesn't mean being outside any cultural preferences. I would say even stronger. Popes might be sometimes even culturally dependent. Let me give you an example. It is very natural for Pope Francis, an Argentinian, to have some reservations toward Anglo-Saxonian countries. You see, I am narrowing the definition by Ambassador Jan Tominski. He spoke about anti-Western. I speak about Anglo-Saxonian prejudice. Anti-Americanism seems to be very natural in Latin America. And Ambassador Tatiana Yezhevska spoke about that aspect in her way. Consequently, his allegedly pro-Russian stand may be easily explained again by his Latin American emotions, because for a long time, Russia seemed to be a counterbalance for the dominant US in Latin America. Of course, this is quite the opposite for the post-Soviet part of the world, and here we have this difference. Let me turn to the famous phrase about NATO barking at Russia's door. Professor Tamara Gjalidze mentioned that. Pope Francis told us during the meeting that his famous phrase about NATO belonged actually to one anonymous head of a state who spoke with him in December the year 2021. A Pope was amazed later how prophetic that head of a state was about a possible war. However, I'm sure this anti-NATO stand did resonate with Pope's Latin American instinct as well. In addition, I may presuppose the strong influence of well-known Putin versteher Jeffrey Sachs, an advisor to the Russian government after the collapse of the Soviet Union and an advisor to the Vatican in recent years. He has just published a piece in Tikkun magazine in which he calls the present war in Ukraine the culmination of a 30 years project of the American neoconservative movement. Again, such a stand might resonate with Argentinian emotions. I told the Pope that I cannot share that head of a state opinion because it presupposes that the world is divided into several blocks, and any nation belonging to a certain bloc is deprived of the right of self-determination. And this, in my opinion, contradicts with the Church social teaching. I saw from Pope Francis' face that he didn't think in this way. There was also one more very important moment during our conversation with the Pope that reminded me about the inertia of Ostpolitik. Again, this longue durée, Ambassador Jan Tominski. long durée of history. Pope Francis proudly mentioned that he sent Cardinal Krajewski to Ukraine to demonstrate his solidarity with Ukrainians, and that cardinal met Orthodox hierarchs as well. My young colleague, Denis Koleda, who is a Protestant and who was present at the meeting, interrupted him and shouted, "Yes, but he met only Orthodox hierarchs of the Moscow Patriarchate and not with those of ecumenical patriarch." And he met Metropolitan Pavlo Lebed, who had the worst opinion in Ukraine. Again, it was visible that His Holiness simply did not understand the essence of the reaction. It was clear that the whole issue of relations with churches in Ukraine is the responsibility of Cardinal Koch. However, it was easy to ignore non-recognized, non-canonical Ukrainian Orthodox churches in the recent past. But now, when all Ukrainian Orthodox churches are recognized and canonical, it is contradiction in terms already. So this point has to be changed in the Vatican. In general, it became very clear for me that Pope Francis is truly a person of goodwill, and definitely not a conscious, aggressive, ideological enemy of Ukrainians, as some people try to describe. I agree with Ambassador Tatiana Yezhevska that his pastoral abilities are very powerful, and according to my understanding, they are even more impressive than the diplomatic ones. Actually, our meeting happened in some sense against the Vatican structure, or at least in avoiding the Vatican structure. And I personally highly appreciated the very fact of our meeting. And the last point, you are right, Ambassador Tatiana Yezhevska, speaking about the need to distinguish between black and white. And let me tell you that I did use an opportunity to remind His Holiness his own words. Love has to be concrete. Thank you very much.